Okay.
Let's go, baby!
So I'm Hao Jing, year 4. After my presentation, you can try to guess what major I am. Yeah? But tonight I'll be talking about the history of RAG. Just took place on 11 August, so roughly 2 months ago. So hopefully it's still fresh for those of you who took part in RAG or maybe batch project this year. But the reason why I think looking into the history of RAG is interesting is because if you look at the history of RAG, it goes back 6 decades, and you get to see through this lens, you get to see the history of Singapore, you get to see the history of the university and so on, right? And RAG is not just receive and give, it's not as simple as that. So I'll be discussing more about that based on my research from last year when I was preparing for the Brexit referendum, as some of you might or might not know. So to give you some context, all right, what happened on campus in the 1950s, it was a very different kind of campus. Singapore was very poor, very few youth managed to make it into college, and for those that did, they felt that they had to prove their worth to society and to give back to society, right? And so at the same time, outside of campus, Singapore was a very happening place politically, all right? So this was the 50s, Singapore was trying to get Merdeka independence from the United Kingdom. You have David Marshall here flying off to London for the first Merdeka talks. And at the same time, you had anti-colonial movements. We had the merger with Malaysia. We had separation and independence, right? So back to what happened on campus. Because the student union at the time was more active and all that. So they felt they had to be people, right? And so in 1957, it was decided that the union would try to organize a welfare week. So every year, they would go out and engage the public and basically do saikang. So here, in 1961, you had students going out to Geylang to repair roads. So this was work camp 1961. And on the right side, you have one of the first RAG Day parades. This was the second RAG Day parade, I believe, from 1960. So what happened in those times was that RAG was the original Chingay, right? So yeah, the raggers proceeding in a convoy from Bukit Timah campus to downtown, and then the flaggers will be at the roadside, with the tin cans donating, like collecting donations. And here you get an example of a float. So here's a dragon, and then you have basically floats that discuss like socio-political issues. But as time grew on, students tried to touch on more sensitive topics. And as a result, the government was not too happy about it. So here you had floats that were banned in 1965 and 66. Because as you would know, Singapore broke away from Malaysia in that year. So it's very sensitive, and the student union faced issues with putting their floats out onto the streets. And here you have Tommy Koh, who was pretty fresh as a lawyer at that time, defending the student union and presenting the case to the police and government. Yeah. And at the same time, as it was a very politically charged period, you had Lee Kuan Yew's right-hand man, his former deputy prime minister, serving as the vice chancellor of the university. And here he subtly tried to reshape the narrative of RAG and Flag. So instead of RAG and Flag being a platform where students were able to, launch their socio-political critiques, it was purely about charity, campus tradition and culture. And so, big contrast from the RAG and Flag of the past, where you were collecting donations for charity. Now it's very much, an insular, inward-looking campus tradition where the faculties come to compete. And that evolution took place over the 70s and 80s, right? To the extent that when the student union president tried to criticize RAG, like you shouldn't be spending so much money on it, you should not, focus on it being an inter-faculty, inter-hall competition, it was voted out by the halls. And the orchestrator of this was the Raffles Hall president at the time, Bae Suan Jin, a medical student, but now the chairman of EDB. So since the 1989 debacle, which was very, it was a huge public scandal. So since then, NUSU has not questioned the ethos of RAG or how it's done. Right? But during that time, faculties and halls started to have doubts about, whether RAG is the right thing. So law pulled out in 1999. 3 other faculties pulled out in 2000, but each time they rejoined. And then in 2015, we have the culmination of the biggest and most costly RAG so far. It's held at the floating platform. There was Christina Grimmie, Sam Willows, Gentle Bones. That year, they raised $450,000. But the thing is, that year, NUSU spent over $500,000 staging that spectacular dragon flag, which which jive very well with SG50. And they also had to mobilize over $120,000 in reserves from the student union. Very controversial vote, USB voted against. But as for USP's own involvement in RAG, we have been taking part in RAG for about a quarter of RAG's history. We joined in 2002, whereas we became a faculty in 2001. But last year we voted to leave during the summer. And prior to leaving, USP had a brief but enjoyable time with RAG. But since then, we've tried to go out and rediscover, RAG and flag's meaning, to be with people. And so, for example, here we have like students creating murals for the Gimo community. And here you have the Gimo, the Bukit Timah MP, right, Christopher D'Souza, engaging students. And we also had students from USP performing in the heartlands at Telok Blangah CC and Clementi CC as well, right? So USP students are beginning to rediscover the roots of RAG and flag while stepping out of this ivory tower and going out, to be with the people, right? So 2 takeaways that I have for y'all. So our recently graduated President Tang mentioned that every year new students matriculate and they take whatever happened before as tradition. So the first point I want to make to freshmen is think twice about traditions, right? Not everything has always been like that. Think about why it became like that. And it also suggests to you that things can be changed. And second point I want to make is that it's not just students who are taking part in student life, right? There are other stakeholders, other forces at work, other people interested in what we do. So here, for example, you have the student union president and the NUS president presenting the flag proceeds to community chest. And this is another big PR event for NUS. So 2 takeaways in mind, right? Not everything is a tradition, and question why things are done. All right, thank you.